joining us is a gentleman who's always here to enlighten us as far as the economy and finance. Let me say a pleasant good evening to Mr. Ved Seereeram, financial consultant. So happy to have you on. Thank you for taking time out with us. How are you this evening?
Hi, Mikey, and all your viewers and listeners.
Thank you so much. Last Monday, the national budget was presented by Finance Minister Commonwealth, 5 hours, 13 minutes. What was the main takeaway for you? Because I know you were listening, you were watching quite attentively. And what was your big takeaway from that?
Well, my main concern is the number of things that were not said. In other words, number of things that were absent in the budget. And what was presented in the budget was a maze that had to be analyzed and understood, and very confusing, in fact. But for years I've been saying that the maths that they have provided in the budget is wrong. The deficit is about between probably 10, $12 billion, not 5. So with such a major, what I would call misrepresentation, it would mean to say that the budget has no, if you don't fix that number, the deficit, if you don't understand the deficit, if they are understating expenditure, and expenditure is not the right word, that is cash flow outflow, there is a source and use of funds statement they're supposed to make. If you have an accounting background, you'll understand what I'm saying. So what we have before us is numbers that don't match, and that is why every year they come to Parliament after the budget, a few months into the budget, and ask for further approval to borrow money. Now, there's something in a budget which is absolutely essential. One, you must establish credibility of the budget. So when you're opening a budget statement for this year, you must tell us how you did last year and year before. Definitely at the last year, to say what was your projections in terms of revenues, what was your expenditure, what was your actual budget, and how you funded that budget. You must explain that. So I think what the country needs to do is to revamp the format of the budget to include certain sections that everyone can understand.
Now, let me ask you this, Mr. Seereeram. I mean, I understand, and I think a lot of times the whole technical aspect of it is lost. The average citizen wants to know when he or she looks at this, the takeaway is going to be something that is going to benefit them directly. Am I going to have to pay more for food? Am I going to have to pay more for transportation? Will I be able to pay for any educational programs for my children? All of these things, they want to know that, listen, is money going to be spent on what seems to be our number one social issue, and that is crime, and all of these things. And when it's all said and done and the dust settles, citizens expect that there's going to be something that's going to be better for them in their life. And they really don't have time, or should you say they don't have a background of accounting, the average citizen, to say, listen, I can't do this maths, I don't understand how this thing is formatted, but is it going to be doing something better for me?
Well, I mean, listen, I'm not saying what you're saying is incorrect. That is correct. They're looking for things, but I'm making the point, all of that is predicated on raising the money that you say you're going to raise. All of those promises, those are just promises, And those promises are dependent upon how much money you can raise. And if you can't raise the money, then you can't spend. And that is the point I'm making. If your deficit is $10 billion, then you're not going to have the money to meet the promises that you're making in the budget. So in other words, let's say they agree to hold gas prices. They agree to hold gas prices. And that is predicated on a certain amount of revenue. If that revenues don't come as they expected, then wouldn't they, midterm or wherever, they're going to say they're going to raise it because they didn't get the revenues? And that's, you see, if the difference was marginal, then I could have accepted it. But when you're dealing with a budget that has that they declare a deficit of $5 billion, that deficit is before loan repayment and sinking fund contribution. I wish I had proven wrong. I've raised this point many years before, and what they've been doing, sometimes they're adding the caveat and sometimes they're not adding the caveat. Make up your mind. What is the expenditure? What is the cash outflow? So all these premises are predicated on how much money you get. That is why you also have a problem by saying, yes, they have allocated so much for Tobago, so much for the Ministry of what you call national security, so much for education and so on. But if that's just an allocation, this budget is just a promised allocation. If they don't have money, they have to start cutting. And therein lies the problem, Mikey.
All right.
But I agree with you that the population look for those things because they are on they that affect them immediately in terms of if they have to raise taxes and so on. Now the property tax, coming to that, they're going to raise property tax. Are they telling us how they're going to raise it? That property tax should be disbanded immediately because they are unable. The preconditions for any tax is you must have the ability to collect it equitably throughout the country. They don't have that ability. When you have different valuations on your property. Now, I don't have a problem if they come to us and say, look, we are going to put a rental value on your property and so much tax you pay. And they allow the citizens to say, okay, if you are going to rent it at $10,000 a month, come and rent it and I'll move somewhere else. But are they prepared to do that? No. So all of that is a sham. All of that is a sham. That property valuation is a lot of work for accountants and valuators. That's about it.
All right. Now, let's look at it from this perspective. Now, let's look at it from this, Mr. Seereeram. What you're saying there basically is that these are promises. These are allocations. They are promises. And these things can only really and truly have some substance if the money is there to back it and if the money is there to make it a reality. For example, in her contribution last Friday, the Social Development Minister, Donna Cox, and of course we're talking about the most vulnerable in our society when it comes from the Social Development Minister. She said that over 20,000 public sector employees and their families are expected to benefit from the government's increase of the minimum wage for its workers. She says that she said that according, as far as was outlined in measures in the budget, there's going to be increased financial stability, food security, and education opportunities among vulnerable communities and young people. Now, when this is said, now you're dealing with promises, and then when you have people who are going to prop it up, what is being said there does not reflect the reality that citizens are actually living on a daily basis.
That is true, and that is where, when you're doing a budget, you have to look at what are the conditions of the citizens and what are their urgent needs. Urgent, when I say urgent needs, because we have to prioritize how you spend each dollar, how you prioritize how you spend each dollar. We should not be spending in upgrading the president's house at this time. It's a question of priorities. It's a question of priorities, but I'm telling you that they would not be able, the deficit is far more than 10 billion in my view. So the question arises that all of this is hogwash that they're presenting the population is hogwash. And I think we as a country, we deserve better than this. And we have parliamentarians of our house, lower house of over 70. They have to demand, and the population has to demand, a budget that makes sense, that addresses the urgent needs of Trinidad and Tobago, and stop talking about fictitious number like GDP growth of 1%. In whose pocket is growing 1%? It's just a few people.
Yeah, and then too, also, it seems to be more of an opportunity to trade political punches rather than to give the people something that is real, that is definitely going to elevate their life. Because you also have the Trade and Industry Minister, Paula Gopi-Schoon, who said that the government, which she's a part of, has been working consistently over the last 9 years to ensure citizens can continue to buy basic food items at affordable prices. I mean, what she said there, nothing is equivalent to the same thing. And she said, in contrast, The UNC did the exact opposite when it was in office from 2010 to 2015. Again, an opportunity to trade blows when in fact that if you're going to defend something, at least you should be able to articulate how it's going to benefit the citizens of this country.
Well, if you notice that this budget debate is an opportunity for them to splatter mud on each other. And how does that benefit the nation when major items in this country is not being addressed? It's not even being discussed. All right, I want to refer you to one particular matter. In the budget, I think virtually there were four brief paragraphs dealing with diversification. Four paragraphs, small. They're about 4 inches of a column. I am saying that this government takes us for a fool because we said diversification is a priority for Trinidad and Tobago if it is to prevent us falling over the cliff. I think all of us agree to that. Are you giving me four small paragraphs, 4-inch reference to diversification? And the amount of language that was referring to TNT Revenue Authority, that is more expenditure, much more expenditure. You know, they shut down Petrotrin, say that it's losing money. The government is losing a lot of money and they now want to tax us. They have wasted all the oil sector fund, they wasted it. They're drawing down on all our savings, that's our fund abroad. They're drawing down on that. So at the end of the day, where it is, what trajectory are we heading to? Where are we going to land up? We are sliding. Forget this foolishness about 1% growth in GDP. What is GDP, by the way? Gross domestic product.
Right.
It does not include all your expenditures, and therein lies the problem. The second point I want to make on GDP, it doesn't tell you how it's distributed. If one person makes $50 billion, that is just going in one person's pocket, that is not the country, but the country GDP going up. So, we have to look at different measures to see how our country is. And one of the key things is unemployment. And secondly is the level of contentment. What is our anxiety index? And that's why you have so many murders in Trinidad and Tobago, so much crime and so on. Just today in Barco, a husband killed his wife and a daughter, a small daughter. Fortunately, the son was at school. I don't know if he went back for the son or what, but he's on the run. So if that is the kind of society we're living in, are you telling me about GDP? Are we gone crazy? Have we gone crazy? We ought to be happy about a 1% GDP rise. Mikey, I feel very sorry for this country. Very sorry for this country.
All right, but we are still we're still being told that come 2027 things are expected to turn around. There's going to be a financial turnaround, and I guess that basically would have to do with the fact that we've hitched so much of our financial wagon onto the energy sector. Are you seeing anything there? Because, I mean, at the end of it all, we're simply not here to sell doom and gloom. But if in reality, you're telling us that really and truly there's absolutely nothing there, and we definitely have nothing to wait for, then, I mean, that's an entirely different story.
Mikey, two things. Let me talk about it. They're betting on something, right? They're betting on something. It may come about, it may not come about, right? But again, that is not diversification, once we agree to that. Then it's better you take some money and buy some tickets in the richest lotteries in the world. You probably have a better chance. So, we are in a mess. The government is in a mess. I think the opposition sensing things, if they get into power, you think they don't have to go through the 90s again? Or cutting costs? Simple things. What has government shown in the budget to show that central government is going to cut costs? They're going to buy 2,000 new cars for the police. Would that address the crime problems? Let me ask another question. The parliamentarians I don't know if it's just ministerial or to what level. They are the most profitable car dealership in Trinidad and Tobago. You buy your car, for 2 or 3 years you can hold it on, you get it tax-free, and then you could sell it with tax after that at a huge profit. Why don't they cut down the duration for buying cars from 3 years to 5 years? Can't we do that? Do parliamentarians have to buy their car? They can be provided a car once a year in service, let government own the car. A car now is not like in the 80s and 70s and 80s where within every 3 years you have to change it due to failure, rust failures and so on. Now cars are lasting 10 years easily, and the banks are lending you money for 10 years. As I mentioned the bank, was there anything in this budget that says that the deficit was X and this is how we are going to fund it? Normally, in every budget, they will talk about the financial sector, how interest rate is going, what's happening to mortgage, what's happening to the liquidity. I didn't see any of those comments here. None of those comments. So I'm asking a question. Was this just a talk shop for the Minister of Finance, or was this a serious rendition of the state of affairs and how we're going to fix it?
And let me ask you, Mr. Seereeram, as far as short-term, medium, and long-term plans, I mean, was that also missing? Because, I mean, we really and truly want to know, government did not put anything to say that, there are different phases that we're going to have to look at and how it's going to come about. We just simply told that hold tight, 2027, we don't know what month, we don't know what exact day, but sometime in 2027, there's going to be a turnaround. And before that, one would think that there would be plans leading up to that will be short-term and medium-term, and of course the long-term process to get us out of this situation.
No, there were no specific items addressing it. There were no specific items. And I think about that's why I come back to the point. We must, as a society, as a nation, as a citizen, demand of a government that a budget presentation, first of all, you must establish what you did last year and see what actually occurred. What was the budget last year and what occurred? Because that is where you establish your budget integrity. To know whether we should sit there for 5 or 6 hours and listen to you, or whether we should go to Starbucks or maybe a local coffee shop and enjoy ourselves and listening to this garbage. It's garbage, I'm telling you, it should not be accepted, it should be rejected. Suppose you start a program, you start a competition, inviting citizens to stay precisely part of a national beat, to reinvent the wheel. But if you start a competition and you get a lot better ideas and coming from the population, they will, at the end of the day, you'll pick the best points and put it into a document, submit it to Parliament, and ask them to approve it. So no one, I understand the man just said that he will increase gas price another time and nobody will ride. I understand he said he's going to talk to 10 hours next year.
I need to, and of course, is it then, all right, so we're looking at two things here before we wrap up, two things here. Yeah. Number one, with taxes. So you're looking at the citizens to provide that based on taxes. And then you're telling us 2027, hold tight, everything is going to be. But what about, is there any plan outside of that we picked up that was said to actually generate revenue, to have some revenue generating program or process? No,
their strategy for generating revenue is taxes. But let me explain this to you. You understand what simultaneous equation is in maths?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? I kind of rusty on that. But simultaneous equation. This country depends upon whatever little surplus from the oil sector, and that is very volatile.
Right.
And government borrowing. Those are our two sources of income. This foolishness about manufacturing sector earning revenues, external revenues and hard currency, what they are doing, they are exporting subsidies that is being generated from the oil surplus from the oil sector and borrowings from government. Please understand that relationship and the structure of our economy. They said the non-revenue energy sector grew. I'm asking a simple question. The non-energy sector, you have agriculture. Agriculture, you probably contributed about $2 billion. And it costs the Ministry of Agriculture, they spend that out. So agriculture really, net, they produce nothing for this country. Nothing. Right? Little or nothing. Less than 2%. So when we say the non-oil sector will take the place of the oil sector, that is pie in the sky, because the non-oil sector that's the manufacturing sector, non-oil manufacturing, non-energy manufacturing sector, depends upon two things, and that is revenues from the oil sector and government borrowings. So those two things are depleting. They're depleting resources. One, oil will be up and down for a while, but overall it's depleting. And government is going to put their head on a wall just now once they continue to borrow. Now they are borrowing from citizens as well, without recording it. Without recording it. When they buy on credit from the local supplier, they don't record. I don't know if you remember, one of our top economists said that government do not have a ledger for payables. You could imagine running a corporation and you don't have any account of payables? Can you, is that acceptable? Somebody with a $60 billion enterprise, and if you ask them, where's your payables? I don't know.
No, that's not acceptable.
It doesn't make sense. So all these things have to be fixed. And the Ministry of Finance, they are failing in their job. And I think they've become very political in their presentation. And that's not good enough for us, because we will be, it's a carrot and stick approach, and they have the carrot till 2027. And at the end of the day, that was a hologram.
Yeah.
So we have nothing at the end of the day. We better get up. I hope it just crashes very fast so we can pick up the pieces and move on again. But that's where we are heading.
Mr. Seereeram, I want to thank you so much for taking time out as always. I will be checking with you periodically as we need to do a part 2 to this, because when you start to connect this entire story, it definitely doesn't look good. I mean, I know we're not here to sell doom and gloom, but I mean, basically we're telling it as it is.
Mikey, if you can do me one favor.
Sure.
Because you have contact with all the intellectuals and so on. Bring them together and ask them what is the deficit. First of all, is this a profit and loss statement? Is it a cash flow budget? Is it a source and use budget? Now the source and use, you can ask any accountant. They will give you a few more items and it will be complete. So we have to be complete in our numbers. They told us they're going to spend about 60 billion, and they accounted, when you add up the 7.5 for different ministries and so on, it adds up to 30. Where's the other 30 billion? You don't expect the population to go through the fine print to hunt for that. That should be in the front page.
Yeah, you're right about that.
But one thing I'm asking is go and find out what is our true deficit, and that is a conversation. Go and ask Mala Dukan. Go and ask her.
All right.
Go and ask all Roger Hussain. Go and ask all the accountants. What is the deficit? If the deficit is not 5 billion, then the whole budget fall apart. Your boss on day one. That's the point I'm making.
I hear you. Thank you so much again, Mr. Seereeram.
Yes.
Keep up the good work. Thank you.